It's that time of the week again, people. It's time for me to give my thoughts on this week's edition of NXT. If you want to comment on this show or anything I've said on this review, comment section is down there. Also in that description box, you'll find two links. You'll find one to this week's edition of NXT, and you'll find one to Brandon Stroud's Best and Worst of NXT Colin, which I recommend you read every week. I know I do. Let's get straight onto this review and not waste any more time. You know, when I hear Divas Action is going to be kicking off NXT, I get quite excited. It really gets me in a good mood on the whole for the show itself. Whereas on Raw or SmackDown, if that kicked off with Divas Action, I'd be a bit like, oh, not this, this show. I really don't care about the Divas division, and I would probably not even talk about it on the review. But like I've said, the Divas division, or Women's division in NXT, is very exciting right now. We've got some great talent in there, which I'm hoping one day will replace a lot of the talent that are on TV now. I mean, you've had people like Caitlyn left. A lot of the Divas on there are really nowhere near the pedestal that AJ Lee has kind of been put on right now. So the Divas division needs Divas that can actually maybe get up to that level in order to make some kind of compelling Divas division, in my opinion. But in the opening match, you've got Summer Rae with Sasha Banks versus Bayley with Natalya. I've got one question. A couple of weeks ago, Charlotte Flair joined Summer Rae and Sasha Banks, and you haven't really seen her since. Where is she? I thought she'd be out there, especially to play mind games on Bayley. Unless, they're just leaving it for a certain time when they can have Charlotte versus Bayley down the line as some sort of blow-off, I don't know. But it just seems a bit strange that Charlotte Flair didn't make an appearance here, or she just hasn't been seen with them for a while now. This was a decent match. I mean, there's nothing special, but the good thing about this match is Bayley finally got her win over Summer Rae. So we can now take her a little bit more seriously. She's getting wins over some pretty high-level heel divas now on the NXT roster. And when you've got a character like Bayley, we, especially with the gimmick she has, we're similar with Emma. We need to give her wins so we can take her a little bit more seriously in the ring and to make it feel like she can actually win some matches. And she got a great reaction. Bayley is, an incredibly over diva, not as over as Emma, in my opinion, but still very over. So giving her this win here, some may say, against Summer Rae and rising heel talent on the WWE Raw roster and SmackDown roster, maybe not a good decision. But in my opinion, I'd say to establish Bayley as some kind of, got to put diva who can go after the championship at some point, maybe when Paige loses the belt. It's a good idea, in my opinion. Let's face it, the segment last week between Colin Cassidy and Aiden English, where they had that sing-off, was pure awesome. It was probably the best segment on the show and a great example of how you can do a non-wrestling entertainment aspect segment on a show. Unfortunately, I don't think the match was ever really going to follow that. I mean, that was pure awesome. This was just kind of there. I mean, Aiden English versus Colin Cassidy, there wasn't really too much to it. The one thing I did notice, though, was it's funny how as soon as you put Aiden English in a feud with some kind of babyface that is in a way over because he's associated with Enzo Amore, SAWFT Soft, he gets booed a little bit more. Whereas when he was just facing random jobbers, he would get cheered and people would call for an encore. Which isn't really how you get a heel over. Aiden English won this match and he won it pretty quickly as well. And when you consider Colin Cassidy is like 7 feet tall, or nearly 7 feet tall, and he's quite big, having Aiden English beat him that quickly, on the one hand, it makes him look very strong. But on the other hand, you need to establish Colin Cassidy a little bit, especially seeing as Enzo Amore is out and he's going to be the main guy on TV portraying the gimmick that, Enzo Amore can't do because he's now in a wheelchair. So I think this could have been a little bit more competitive, to be honest. But Aiden English getting the win, that doesn't surprise me because he is a great character right now. And Colin Cassidy, really, in all honesty, is just playing second fiddle to someone who really should probably be a manager. But there you go. Still, it was just the segment that was there. But the segment last week, I would take this segment on this show and that segment last week, because that was just really good. But this just was just there. One of the big issues in wrestling right now is the lack of realism and the lack of relatability, in my opinion. I'll just give you an example. Adrian Neville. If some guy had just cost me my big title shots and he was in the same room as me, I wouldn't just casually talk to him and challenge him to a match. I would probably want to kick his ass. Which is why this whole backstage segment and this whole banter between Tyler Breeze and Adrian Neville, I was just like, Adrian Neville, kick his ass. You would try to kick his ass. You wouldn't just say to him, I'll challenge you to a match next week. You wouldn't casually talk to a guy that's just cost you a title shot. I'm just saying. They tried to cover their basis by having Adrian Neville say that he'll let him squirm until next week. And I guess that'll be our main event match next week. But, just this lack of realization by WWE and NXT sometimes, and the lack of realism in some of these feuds is really why a lot of people can't get behind a lot of them. I'm not saying this is an example of one of those feuds. I'm just saying, if you had Tyler Breeze interrupt this segment just like you did, and Adrian Neville saw him surely the first thing he would do would be run up there and try and kick his fucking ass. So we've been seeing a lot of Xavier Woods on Raw and SmackDown lately, and he's been in this storyline which is essentially there to turn Brodus Clay heel, essentially. And, you know, I haven't really been paying too much attention to Xavier Woods. I didn't really feel he was that big of a player on NXT. I felt he deserved a chance on the main roster, but I haven't really been paying too much attention to him on Raw, to be honest. I'm just going to be honest there, because I think he's just there to be a tag team of R-Truth, and that's really it. I don't think he's really there to get him. I don't really think they put him there to get him over. I just think they put him there because they needed a reason to turn Brodus Clay heel and someone to put with R-Truth, who could sing and dance and whatever. So apparently, the authority haven't forgotten he was instrumental in bringing back Big Show and decided to punish him. About 3 months too late, which means this really didn't make all that much sense, really. I mean, by now, Big Show has just done really nothing. He hasn't really gone against the authority since, so why is it such a big deal? You know, and it turns out Kane gave him this match against Alexander Rusev, and Rusev beat him pretty quickly, and you know, it's another win for Alexander Rusev over a guy who, let's face it, is on the main roster right now. And no doubt he impressed Kane, who was there acting on behalf of the authority ringside. So, you know, Rusev again is getting a big win over, you know, not necessarily a big win, but still a win over someone that has been generally on Raw and SmackDown, you know, in a storyline on there. That's a big deal for a guy like Alexander Rusev. WWE.com exclusive with Kofi Kingston after his loss to Rusev last week. He blamed Lana for his loss and challenged Rusev to a rematch. Oh, this should be interesting. Hopefully the match will go a little bit longer and Kofi Kingston will lose, because that's what he deserves. He isn't in the same league as some of these people on NXT when it comes to being on a microphone, even though it wasn't necessarily a bad promo. I'm just saying. So Tyson Kidd had a random match against Baron Corbin. I'm guessing they don't really have too much for him to do on NXT, but they're just going to give him some matches to, you know, get him back from his long layoff he's just had. And I find it funny that the commentators keep commenting on the fact that Tyson Kidd kind of looks like Eddie Guerrero, because, you know, he kind of does in the trousers and everything, in the tights even. Kind of does look a little bit like him. But to me, the whole focus on this segment, really, I wasn't focusing on Tyson Kidd at all. I was focusing on Baron Corbin. You know, he's a big motherfucking ex-footballer, 6'8", 275 pounds, 29, 30 years old. And I was just thinking, what a great win this would be for a Baron Corbin if they're going to debut him like this. And, you know, Tyson Kidd got the win here, as he probably should do, because he's an established guy, and Baron Corbin was having his debut on NXT. And I really felt if you're going to debut a guy, give him some video packages, or maybe a bit of promo time, or hype this up or something. Just saying, but, you know, Baron Corbin, while he looked very green in the ring, knows the kind of guy I could see, you know, a guy like Vince McMahon like him. He's a big motherfucking ex-footballer. And we've seen many other wrestlers, such as Goldberg, you know, Brock Lesnar is an ex-American footballer right now, that WWE would probably love to push to the moon if they got the opportunity. Hell, Roman Reigns, a.k.a. Liaki, a.k.a. the cousin of The Rock, he was a former American footballer. So WWE love pushing these ex-American footballers. Mojo Rawley, another guy who the WWE are quite high on right now. So, you know, apparently, guess what he used to do for a living? Oh, he used to be a footballer. WWE love pushing these footballers. It's not usual there'll be a main event on NXT, which I don't give two shits about, but this week was an exception. Hunico and Camacho versus the Ascension in a tornado tag match for the NXT Tag Team Championships. I haven't cared for this feud throughout this whole time. I just don't care about Hunico and Camacho as baby faces, and right now the Ascension, I'm at a point where I can't care less about the Ascension anymore. And it's not because of their gimmick, it's just because they're not fighting anyone I really care about. And when that happens, you know, you really stop caring about the champions. You really do. And also, generally, when you do first ever matches, you would think they'd want to make it feel big. And this feud has never, ever felt big at all. I mean, tornado tag matches and no count out, no disqualification, where everyone is in the ring at the same time. There was no weapons, apart from they used the bikes as weapons maybe once or twice. And just never really had a big feel, in my opinion. It was quite funny at the start when the fans were chanting, "We want pit bulls." I just found that kind of funny. Also, this match, there was some decent spots in this match. I'm not going to take away from it. It wasn't necessarily a bad match. It's just that I really found it hard to get into because I really didn't care about the heat between these two. I mean, don't get me wrong, there were some nice spots, but that was really about it. If you want to judge this purely on wrestling merit, you could probably say this was a decent match, but it needs a little bit more than just wrestling to make me care about a segment. Also, the way it ended, it was kind of stupid, really. I mean, you had both Hunico and Camacho looking like complete chumps, just fucking around with Vic Victor on the outside. I'm just thinking, you You know, Mason Ryan did this a while back. He focused on the guy outside of the ring and totally lost focus on the guy in the ring for no reason. Like, Hunico, let Camacho deal with the guy on the outside of the ring. You deal with Conor O'Brien. You know, just logic like that. Illogical things that people would do when they're trying to work a wrestling match. I don't know. Just look like complete chumps while in this match. If Hunico match, that's probably what they fucking deserve. Because in my opinion, they are a bunch of chumps. But there we go. The Ascension win, no real surprise here. Hunico match win, they're going to win the tag titles, were they? Let's face it. Were they ever really built up as legitimate contenders? I mean, all they got was a win over Ascension in a roll-up. And then they lost to him in a rematch, I believe. And maybe another match. But hopefully this is the end of this feud. I don't know where they're going to go with the Ascension right now because there's just no other tag teams. I mean, the next best one I probably would have said was Colin Cassidy and Enzo Amore, but Enzo Amore's got a broken leg. So he's not going to be wrestling for a while now. So what are they going to do with the Ascension? I have no idea. And, you know, if they're going to continue down this route with the Ascension, then I'm just going to care about them even less. So when they come to the main roster, which I'm guessing will happen at some point, you know, is it going to be like this? This is exactly how it's going to be. Generally, when WWE bring people to the new roster, they have a storyline to start off with, but they can't ever follow it up. So it really does beg to differ. Do you really trust them? Do you really trust WWE when they bring up certain superstars? There are exceptions, of course, like Bray Wyatt, but even some point, you know, Shield as well, even some points they had lulls where they just didn't seem to feud with anyone or matter. To really dwell on my overall thoughts on this show, I'm going to look at this from a couple of different aspects. I like the show to flow well. I like to see good wrestling on the show. I like to see good promos on a show. I like to see good storylines and good storytelling on the show. Those are four things I really look out for. As for the flow of the show, I think the flow of the show was pretty decent. You know, there was a couple of short matches in there, but they were separated by interviews, and the main event did have, did kind of set itself out from the rest of them because it was a little bit longer. You know, as for storylines and stuff, there wasn't really many storylines on this show that I really cared about too much. And the main event storyline, which was, you know, the Tag Team Championship match, I really didn't care about all that much. You know, as for the promos, you know, last week we had a great promo segment. This week, some of the backstage promos were a bit, in my opinion. So that wasn't really that was more of a cross than a tick this week. As for the wrestling, you know, I mean, it was average. I mean, the main event, you know, it kind of doesn't help when the wrestling is decent, but the storyline is a bit We had a lot of squash matches in there, so it's kind of hard to really say. The Divas action was okay, but we had, you know, 3 or 4 squash matches in the main event, which went on a little bit longer. So in my opinion, this show overall just didn't feel like youthful NXT this week. It really didn't. That's just my opinion. But if you have any different opinions, please let me know down in the comment section below. I'll be here once again, same time, same place next week, doing the same damn review. Thank you very much for watching this review. You have, and goodbye.